Well, good morning, everyone. We'll start with the opening karakia. I have some sad news to pass, and I'd ask all the councillors to stand. I just want to acknowledge the passing of our former Taupō District Mayor, David John Treuvis, overnight. While we haven't had a formal statement from his family, we feel it's appropriate that we acknowledge David's 24 years of service to our district and his passing. We await a direction from his family as to how they wish to honour David, but in the meantime, I would like us all to stand for 1 minute's silence. This will come as a shock to many people, including the staff and the council building and the whole town. David was well known and well respected. So good morning to everyone and welcome. We'll try and do our best to get through today. Today we come together to consider one of the most significant decisions facing local government in recent years, where the Taupō District should submit a proposal under the government's Head Start processes, and if so, what outcome we believe best serves our communities. This is not a decision we take lightly. The choices we make today have the potential to shape how local government operates in our region for decades to come. They will influence representation, decision-making, service delivery and financial sustainability, and ultimately the future of the communities we serve. Over recent months there have been extensive discussions, analysis, engagement and debate on the opportunities and challenges before us. Today is appropriate for elected members to carefully consider the information, share perspectives and determine a way forward. While views around this table may differ, I encourage us all to approach the discussions with respect, openness and a clear focus on what is in the best interests of the people of the Taupō District, both now and into the future. I would like to thank councillors, staff advisors and everyone involved in preparing the information here today. The work you have done has enabled us to have an informed discussion. Thank you. And I'd just like to acknowledge we have two mayors in the audience today. Axel, the mayor from Waikato District, and Mike, the mayor from Waipa District. Welcome, gentlemen. We have some apologies from Councillor Leonard. Oh, she's online?
You're online. I'm online. I'm not an apology.
Thank you for that, Kylie. And I just wish to advise that we have Bronson Perch, our local democracy reporter is here in the audience, reporting for the Waikato Herald. Are there any conflicts of interest pertaining to the agenda? That being the case, we'll move on to item 4.1, Head Start, and I'd ask Nick Carroll, our policy manager, to start this off. And if we could just hold our questions to the end of it, is that what you prefer, Nick? So we get you generally cover all our questions off in your presentation. So if we hold the questions to the end, it would be appreciated.
Yes, that would be ideal. Thank you. So for those who haven't had the benefit of meeting me, my name's Nick Carroll. I'm the policy manager. I've been at Taupō District Council for 27 years now, so I have a reasonable understanding of the organisation in the district and the Waikato and Bay of Plenty regions as well. So I guess my primary role in this process to date has been looking at the non-financial analysis and looking at how we weigh the different options. So I'll just let Sarah introduce herself.
Kia ora koutou. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Matthews, General Manager Organisation Performance. Spent a few years in local government myself, having previously, so I've been at Taupō almost 4 years, having previously been at Ruapehu and Waipa before that. Again, just by way of introduction, I'm a chartered accountant by trade and have primarily focused on the financial metrics, hence why I'm sitting by Nick today.
So we want to cover 3 basic areas today. We're going to talk about where we've come from in terms of this process, because it's not a process that Council has initiated. We're going to talk about the approach we've taken to the analysis of information, and you will have seen in your report that there is a lot of information to consider in terms of this decision. And then we're going to sum up around the conclusions that we as staff have drawn from that analysis. Acknowledging that you may choose different conclusions. We are going to talk quite a lot today about the financial analysis as well, and that's largely because when we talked to our community, they came back to us and said that there are a whole lot of concerns that they have around the financial viability of an organisation going forward, and particularly the affordability for the delivery of services and functions. So that's why that's quite a strong theme going through our presentation today. What I would note is that this process has been far from ideal. We're operating within the government's process and the government's timeframes, and that has created real pressure on us as an organisation. It's creating real pressure on you as decision makers, and I think we've seen that replicated across the country, certainly in the Waikato context. Also, just want to note that the community has had limited opportunities to input into this process so far. We went out quite early to try and understand what was important to them, but we weren't able to put a depth of analysis in front of them that you've got today. So they've not had the chance to see the sort of information that you've got to base your decision making on. As part of that, I also want to acknowledge that we have made an honest attempt to try and engage our iwi partners despite the challenges of the government's process. And we've done that through a number of collective hui, but also individual hui. And we'll talk a little bit later on a particular slide about the nature of the feedback that we've had from the community and our iwi partners. So where's this come from? It's been driven by the government. And the government's got a set of objectives around local government, and they're largely around trying to simplify and create more financial resilience going forward. But we've, as a country, been through the Three Waters reform in recent years, and a lot of that was about recognising the challenges that really small councils sometimes face in delivering the core services that our communities need. The government has promoted a set of objectives in their policy document, which are not only tied to financial resilience, but are also trying to drive towards a quick transition at this point to a new set of unitary authorities across parts of the country. And tied in with that is the reform of the Resource Management Act, which is happening in parallel. And that provides some real challenges for local government trying to deliver that transition at the same time that we're looking at amalgamation proposals. What I would also say is that the government was very upfront at the start in making it clear that this process called Head Start is designed for councils who are ready to go. So around the country, there have been a number of regions who have been talking for many years about opportunities for amalgamation. Wellington is a classic one that comes to mind, where there have been ongoing conversations about how councils could work closer together, what would the efficiencies be that they could generate, and how could representation be effectively managed. So the government, through Head Start, is trying to provide a pathway for those councils in those regions where conversations are quite mature. The challenge we've faced in the Waikato is we've not been having those conversations. We've not had that depth of analysis or the frank conversations at elected members level that you need to be able to put forward a strong proposal for amalgamation. So just briefly in summary, the government's looking to take the two tiers of local government that we currently have. We've got territorial authorities, which are city and district councils who deliver a wide range of functions for their local communities. Deliver wastewater, roading, reserves, planning, dog control. I think we've got around about 40 different functions that we deliver as an organisation. And then the other tier of local government are the regional councils, which sit over a much larger geographic area, and they have a more defined set of functions which tend to be more environmentally based. Managing our coastal marine areas, looking after flood management, dealing with water allocation and water quality. The government's proposals talk about taking those two tiers and combining them into new authorities called unitary authorities, which would hold all of those functions together. Now, as we've seen through our negotiations over the last 3 months, that provides some challenges for us because territorial authorities have had our boundaries based on the delivery of services to communities of interest, whereas regional councils deliver their environmental services largely across catchments. Two different types of services defined in two different ways, and that's why we see very different boundaries. The challenge that we've faced with Head Start is that the government's intention has been to create unitary authorities based on territorial authority boundaries, not catchment boundaries. And that's created some real tension around how we manage things, particularly for us, because Taupō District Council sits in 4 different regions. We've got Manawatu, Wanganui to the south, we've got the Hawke's Bay over to the east. We're obviously part of the Waikato, but there's a big part of our district which also sits in the Bay of Plenty region. So we face particular challenges in working out where do we sit in terms of potential amalgamation options. Second point I just wanted to make is underpinning the government's policy intent is an assumption that bigger is always better, that if we create bigger units of local government, then that will deliver cost efficiencies for ratepayers. We've got serious doubts about whether that will actually happen. There's been work done by the Commerce Commission, and there are external examples. We've picked up a number, as you will have seen in our report, from Australia, looking at what sort of size of local government unit is effective in terms of delivering efficiencies for the ratepayers. The rule of thumb seems to be around about that 100,000 population mark. So one of the challenges that we've been looking at as we've weighed up different options is what sort of size of sort of unitary authority might be appropriate to be part of in the future if we're forced into an amalgamation position. The other really important point to bear in mind is that there is a huge amount of uncertainty at this point in time in the process. We've got government's policy intent at this point. However, that government might change come November. Even if we get a reasonably similar government, we could end up with a change in priorities for that government post being re-elected. We know that we're going to have to see legislative change to put in place any amalgamation proposals that come forward through this Head Start process. That legislation's yet to be drafted, and we're not expecting to see it until sometime in 2027. There's uncertainty for the councils who choose not to be part of the Head Start process or are not chosen to be part of the Head Start process. The government's talked about a backstop process, which all those other councils will fall into. That's not been designed yet. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what the timing is around that. There's been some suggestion that it would be designed reasonably quickly in 2027, picking up on some of the lessons from the Head Start process. But again, that comes back to government priorities at the time. We do know that it's likely that if there is a backstop process, it will probably align with the local government electoral cycle, which suggests 2031 would be the next opportunity for change. The other thing that we're very conscious of is that the government's got limited capacity as it moves into not only election, but then that tricky period post an election when they're trying to re-establish themselves. And while there have been a lot of conversations around the country with councils looking at opportunities for amalgamation, I think the reality is that the government's probably only got limited capacity to actually progress a number of those ahead of their deadline that they've put in place, which is the local government elections in 2028. The reality is there are probably only going to be 3 or 4 proposals which could realistically be promoted in that time frame and successfully delivered. And part of the reason I say that is an amalgamation process is hugely intensive in terms of time and resource, not only for the councils involved, but for government as well. So we've been on a little journey. The government announced this policy intent in May, and since then we've had 3 months to try and do what we can to understand the implications. One of the first things that we did as an organisation was go out to the community and try and understand what were the important drivers from a community's perspective. We did that around June. We then moved into a period of collecting a lot of information, talking to other councils, trying to understand where they're at, trying to understand financial information and non-financial information about how they operate and how it would look if we combined. What is patently obvious through this process is the Waikato region is a big complex beast. It has 11 councils, including the regional council, and it covers a massive geographic area. That makes it incredibly challenging when we're starting to talk about different amalgamation options. because amalgamation in one part of the region obviously affects the councils and the balance of the region. And that's quite important when you're thinking about whether you're going to put forward or join an existing proposal. So our assessment process has looked at the government's 5 criteria, which you can see up on the slide there, but it's also looked at the criteria that the community have told us are really important and that iwi partners have told us are really important. Because this is a process about deciding what's important for Taupō community going forward. We'll come to the financial analysis in a few slides, but it's probably really important at this point to just note that different councils will have their own financial analysis, and that's because they've made different assumptions, they've used different metrics, or they've used different data sets as starting points. It's not to say one's wrong and one's right, they're simply just a different view of the world. The other thing that I really want to emphasise is while you've got a report with a depth of analysis from an officer's perspective, different people will weigh things differently in terms of these criteria. There are a lot of subjective judgments to be made. This is not a black and white process. And that's okay for there to be those different views. So when we went out to the community, we heard a lot of different viewpoints, but this set of bullets really highlights what we felt were the key themes that were coming through. There was certainly a strong sense of identity, and I think that's partly tied to the environment that we operate in, with the lake and the mountains at the heart of our district. Certainly lots of concern about loss of control over our assets that we've built up, and the TEL fund has come up a number of times as an example, but also the council has a lot of land holdings which add value to the ratepayers. There was a strong desire for council not to rush into a decision without a clear sense of benefit. And I think that's because a lot of people have looked at the Auckland example where we saw the amalgamation of a number of councils in a reasonably tight geographic area with a lot of shared labour markets, housing markets and infrastructure costs. And that still created some real challenges in terms of local voice and autonomy around decision making. And some real question marks still remaining around the real efficiency gains. As I noted earlier, there was a really strong theme around financial resilience and affordability coming through the feedback from the community, and a sense that smaller is going to be better. And I think that's largely tied back to this idea about autonomy and local voice in decision making. We certainly heard a very strong set of statements around upholding the treaty settlements that we have in place. And we've got a set of obligations and arrangements that are not only operating at an iwi authority level, like our joint management agreements, but even at a hapu level, such as our mana whakahono arrangements down in Turangi. The protection of our environment was key, and I think that's intrinsically tied to the identity that we have as a community. And then one of the strong messages from our iwi partners that came through was making sure that they weren't forgotten when we were talking about different representation arrangements, and making sure that they had opportunities to be involved in decision making. So you sent us away as officers to look at 4 options, and in brief, those were option A, looking at the whole of the Waikato as one single unitary authority. Now, I'll just clarify that Rotorua District also sits partly within the Waikato region, but we've not included them as part of this option A assessment. Option A, this whole of the Waikato, has been looked at by almost all of the other councils. It certainly started off as the government's preferred approach, and that's why I think councils have felt it was important to at least analyse it and understand its implications. And then option B and C looked at different combinations of a smaller local government unit, what we essentially call a sub-regional unitary authority, because it's picking up a number of councils within the region, but not all of them. Option B was very much focused more towards the King Country, Waitomo and Otahonga, and with the potential to pick up Ruapehu and South Waikato. And then option C was more orientated towards the Bay of Plenty, picking up South Waikato, Rotorua, and potentially Ruapehu as well. And then option D was looking at not going into a Head Start proposal at this time, bearing in mind that Head Start proposals are a voluntary process at this stage. So, having done a lot of analysis, we've come to the conclusion as officers that we think we are strongest at this point not amalgamating with others. And one of the large drivers around that is financial, and Sarah's about to jump into that financial analysis in some depth. But it's important to bear in mind that it's not just about finances. There are opportunities to maintain autonomy, and particularly our own decision-making and destiny around things like our infrastructure and service needs. We've got the opportunity through established iwi relationships and agreements to fulfill our obligations in terms of treaty settlements. We have our own unique set of growth priorities as a district, and one of the concerns that's emerged through the analysis is if we amalgamate with others, there's the potential that those growth priorities, both urban and rural, get drowned out. Looking after the environment was certainly something that was really important, and I was reminded of one of our core statements as an organisation, which is looking after the place we love. I think, again, that speaks to the importance of the environment. Our lake environment and our mountains are quite unique within the region. Even if we look across to Rotorua, which has got a series of lakes, they're quite different in their identity and particularly their nature. And then lastly, the financial analysis talks about our financial strength as an independent organisation at this point. So at that stage, I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you. So again, I know finances aren't everyone's thing, and everyone around the table has been treated to a lot of information today about the financials, again, given the work we've done. So I just wanted the opportunity to take the public through a lot of the stuff we've already gone through together in workshops and the like. So thought that was important. Now, Nick's already kind of shown these options, but I thought it was important to set the scene as to what colours they are in the financial graphs going forward, and some of the kind of base information that people are interested in. So that's your single Waikato unitary, and it's throughout the graphs as that teal colour. Then we've got option B, which is your Central North Island option, and again, there's the makeup of the councils, and that is indicated through the financials by that navy blue colour. And then we've got the Rotorua, South Waikato and Ruapehu option, which is option C, and that is indicated by the blue. Now, backstop is a word, as Nick said, we're not really sure what it means, so we didn't do any analysis on what backstop might mean, because obviously there's nothing to analyse there. However, we did put a baseline comparator throughout the financials. Now, that was the Taupō District Council current state plus the regional allocation. So just to be clear what that is in the financials. We thought that was important given we're comparing to what we are as a current district. Now, the key financial summary, again, I don't want to bore anyone, but I just do think it is important to go over what we have done. Now, we collected and analysed quite a lot of financial information, including the most recently publicly available financial information. So primarily for the modelling, we ended up using the 25-26 annual plans. Now, we actually made the modelling really flexible so councillors could get in there and have a look at all sorts of options. So the original financial information we prepared had Waikato, Bay of Plenty and most of Horizons in it as well. And again, that kind of, as we work through getting to option stage, helped councillors look at what councils were around us. So that obviously gives you your current state as at 30th of June 2026. Now, this is also supported by the 24-25 annual reports. There are some things that we don't provide in our planning documentation, such as detailed asset costings and the like. So that was supported by that. Also, we collected the 2026-27 annual plans. And again, did a comparison to make sure there were no major variances to that data. However, we did use, again, that 25-26 data because it included waters, and in the 26-27 year, a lot of councils were either partly or wholly transferring out waters, which made the data set a little less clean, although recognising the finance team did a bit of work on that as well. We also collected information from the 2025 water service delivery plans, long-term plans specifically related to financial data at set points in time, asset management plans, valuations, other public data, as well as some information that we did request specifically from certain councils where something was unclear. So all of that data was collected manually by the team. We did an internal peer review to ensure the data was accurate. And then we did use AI, particularly supporting outputs, checks on quality, consistency and fairness. And I just wanted to make that clear because, we have used AI to support this process. So as I said, the councillors around the table have had the financial analysis in detail. We've done a couple of iterations of the release of the spreadsheet, which has all that data, which is, I'm sure, been helpful to get to this stage today. As I said, we excluded waters. Now, this was due to most councils having transferred or transferring water services, with the exception of Rotorua and Taupō. So we did analyse the water service information and asset quality as part of the work we did, particularly in relation to Taupō and Rotorua. But we did not include it in the final document only because we didn't believe that was relevant given the comparability challenges and the fact that Taupō and Rotorua have alternate service delivery options if they did wish. So we thought, again, we wanted to collect it, to have a look, but not relevant for the final document. Now, the regional council costs were allocated by a rating units basis using the primary regional council. And again, as Nick said, we do sit across 4 regional councils. However, our primary region is Waikato. Noting there is cross-subsidisation risk in the options other than the whole region, and the analysis we'll show in a minute, we do believe probably a little bit less risky in the Taupō standalone data. So it was done at rating unit basis. We thought that, again, was the most relevant given if you look at Taupō, for instance, we've got the same we've got the same rating units as Waipa, however, about 20,000 less population. Again, that's just due to the rating number we service being probably the more relevant metric. And then we applied optimistic efficiency and transition cost assumptions based on Auckland amalgamation modelling. Now that's really important to note because we believe we have done a really best case amalgamation assumption. We've presented the efficiencies as being realised immediately. We've based it on the projected efficiencies of Auckland Super City when that amalgamated, and transition costs were assumed to be debt funded. So again, we think we've been, the modelling's been deliberately favourable to amalgamation options to avoid bias towards the baseline comparator. So again, probably just important to point out. Sorry, that was very long. Now, the Regional Council financials. So this data, here again, we haven't been provided the exact split by district of Regional Council costs. And as I said, we did assume that at a rating unit basis. Now for Taupō, we did have a look in detail, as much detail as we could. So the Regional Council collects 13.4 million from Taupō District, plus the amount TDC previously rated for public transport. We had a look at the targeted expenditure in the Lake Taupō Management Zone, which was 1.5 million, but we are also a small part of the Waikato, Upper Waikato Zone as well, which has 1.3 million of expenditure. However, when looking at that targeted rate for those services, again, we believe that is in line with the expenditure. And of general costs, we're paying 10.79 compared to 10.78% of rating numbers. So we pay our share of those general costs as well. And again, looking at some of the regional council functions, we do believe we are paying at least our share of the costs. Now, these efficiencies have been, this is a slide that didn't end up in the final presentation, but I thought important to talk through today. So, you know, I want to be really clear that the larger models do have the most opportunity for efficiency, particularly in this modelling. So these efficiency and cost impacts are what would apply to Taupō ratepayers. So again, we've modelled out those efficiencies and then prorated them to Taupō's portion of that. So how we've modelled the efficiencies was based on the 4.4 to 6% of operating expenditure once fully realised, which again is in line with that Auckland expectations and some Australian council amalgamations as well. However, as Nick said, based on some reports we are aware of, those efficiencies are probably a little bit optimistic. But again, important to note that these are already included in the numbers. So these were kind of our important metrics. Now, our per rating unit metric, we kind of wanted to show, you know, across the different options what some of those key financials were. So we did collect revenue per rating unit and we used it for debt comparison particularly. However, you know, revenue per rating unit, you know, is slightly limited in its application of, you know, in light of that being a relevant measure. Now that's just because there are significant non-rates revenue that may be uncertain over the long term, primarily NZTA revenue, for example, and there are some of our peers that get significantly higher subsidies than we do. And also with rates capping coming, you know, revenue is probably going to be limited in that respect as well. So again, we did collect that information. It's a handy data point to have. We didn't consider that one of the key financials that ended up on the table below because of that. And we thought the more relevant metric was operating costs per rating unit. So that's your post efficiencies, that's your operating cost per rating unit, and that shows the Taupō baseline still being a lower OPEX per rating unit than the other options with generous efficiencies applied. Now, when you come to debt per rating unit, Taupō there you can see as second to option B, which is your Central North Island. Now we've got some councils in there that do have very low debt. However, again, that's a gross debt metric, and we just put our metric in there, which is in the little orange box with the no fill. Now that's your Taupō less TEL, and that's just kind of a measure of where your net debt kind of sits. Again, Taupō looks quite favourable from a debt perspective. The debt to revenue ratio, again, quite favourable. We didn't model TEL out of that one, but it has similar impact to the slide before. And I guess important note is that there are only 3 other councils in New Zealand that have a AA stable rating with SP Global. So that's Auckland Council, New Plymouth District Council and Whangarei Council. So obviously Auckland Council post-amalgamation and then Taupō. So that's a really good metric on long-term financial sustainability, and again supports the analysis there that our debt comparatively is quite low. Operating surplus ratio. So this is an interesting one that kind of shows the extent to which operating revenue exceeds operating costs. Although this is just measured at a point of time, it is generally a useful indicator of long-term financial sustainability because it shows whether your current revenue is sufficient to cover the cost of delivering services, including depreciation. And the positive operating surplus generally indicates the capacity to contribute to debt repayment as well. So again, from a long-term financial sustainability perspective, the Taupō baseline has a much higher operating surplus, and again probably speaks to the fact that the community have said to us that debt is really important to them, and our financial strategy takes a stance towards debt that we will pay that back, and we fully fund depreciation. So I think that's probably the key things you kind of see in that graph. And then asset information. Now, asset information, this was not my work, but I will do my best to present it. And yeah, thanks to the team who have supported this. So while present day financial information is important, where asset information really comes in is to look at some of that future state, right? So what future investment might be required, or whether there are any particular concerns in relation to asset information. So we did a bit of analysis, particularly around the two of the larger outstanding asset classes if waters get taken out of councils. Like I said, we did collect the water information, and councillors it has been shared to councillors. But I will present where we got to with the asset information. So that's the transport asset score out of 100. Now, a few things we used to come up with these scores. One of which is your asset quality, and then the other is the data. The reliability of your data. So those two add together to get a transport asset score. Now, we also were supported by information from NZTA, again, a kind of independent assessment of data quality, and this shows the output of that piece of work that the policy team did. Again, Taupō's asset condition very strong from a transport perspective. And again, building asset scores across the options were assessed. Now, this was based on the available data, so I just want to point out, while we had whole information for transport, the building asset scores, there were some councils missing, so we ended up doing an average. Which is fine, because again, as it shows, the asset condition of Taupō buildings is substantially higher than the other council options. So yeah, in summary, I guess financially we are strong. That table just, those were the key financial indicators we use for the analysis. Now, as I said, OPEX per rating unit was a really important one, given it kind of signals your cost of service. Debt per rating unit, again, some future, your future liability, and then debt to revenue as a comparator to how much debt you can actually support. Then you've got your transport asset score and building asset score in relation to future costs and future liabilities, and then operating surplus ratio, so kind of how much you're already putting towards the future. So I guess that is the summary there of your options, and as you can see there, from a most favourable, least favourable perspective, the baseline again is showing quite substantially more favourable, with option B being quite a distant second, option A being third, and option C being fourth.
So we've talked about how strong we are as an existing organisation, but there is still this risk that sits out there in terms of the government process about mandatory amalgamations at some point in the future, potentially through a backstop process. One of the considerations we had around that risk was trying to understand if we're forced into a position where amalgamations are taking place, are we better off in a bigger local government unit or a smaller local government unit? And the options that we've assessed have allowed us to look at those variations. The conclusion we've come to is we believe that we're better off in a smaller sub-regional local government unit than a larger all of Waikato unit. And that's largely around our strong local voice. It's around our financial resilience. Certainly a sub-regional entity is a lot more deliverable in the sort of timeframes that the government's talked about. And we certainly believe that in a tighter, geographically tighter sub-regional, you're more likely to get better quality service delivery for our communities. So, as we noted earlier, you're not making this decision in isolation. Everybody else is going through the same exercise. Most councils, in fact, all the other councils will be making decisions after you. So there's a succession of councils making decisions from sort of tomorrow onwards. Most of those are around the 4th and the 5th of August in the Waikato context. But in terms of Waitomo and Otorohanga, they've certainly come out very publicly and have said that they're putting in a proposal. Now that's obviously challenging if you're looking at a proposal which takes in the King Country. Ruapehu have put out a paper, an agenda paper, which has highlighted that they've had some constructive conversations with a range of councils, including Taupō, but they need more time to explore the implications for their community about different amalgamation options. South Waikato are meeting on Thursday, and their paper came out last night. Their agenda paper talks about a Western Waikato model, which picks up from Taupō in the south, South Waikato, Waipa, Hamilton City, and Waikato district. So that's been framed as a Western Waikato. And the reason that's been talked about as a Western Waikato is because Waikato District Council, through public workshops, has been promoting that as an option. Now, just to be clear, Waikato District Council has not made an official decision on that at this point. But certainly that's been promoted through public workshops. And then lastly, Hauraki, Thames Coromandel and Matamata Piakau have been talking about their own unitary authority sort of on the eastern side of the Waikato region. And that's largely driven by catchment. So they're sitting in the Matamata, Piakau and Thames Coromandel catchment. So there's some synergies there. It's probably important also to note that as we're moving towards a situation where it's looking like there could be some sub-regional proposals coming in across the Waikato, those proposals that do go in have to talk about how the delivery of regional functions and services will continue across the whole region. They need to talk about whether there are any communities which are negatively impacted. So if you imagine, that's a good example, flood management is the easiest one that comes to mind. The control gates on Lake Taupō get shut when there's substantial rain events, and that's used as a mechanism to reduce flooding in the lower Waikato. So you can immediately see decisions made at the top of the catchment can impact what happens at the lower part of the catchment. And then lastly, any of those proposals that go in need to talk about whether the door is being left open for other councils to join them going forward. So at this point, the paper that you have in front of you is recommending that you don't rush into a decision at this point. More information is going to become available, particularly in relation to the success or not of the Waitomo and Otahonga proposal. Through our discussions, a combination of those two councils has been seen as a strong potential amalgamation option in the future. It's not one that we've actively chased at this point, because Waitomo and Otahonga have been very clear about promoting their own proposal at this stage. We will know by the 6th of August what other proposals are going in across the Waikato. We'll also have a sense about what the level of risk is around a large Waikato unitary being promoted by other councils in the region. In September, once we see cabinet decisions, we'll get a flavour for what sort of scale of sub-unitary authority might be appropriate. And to give you an example of how that's relevant, Waitomo and Otahonga combined will be around about the 20,000 population mark. We will get an idea about whether that's seen as an appropriate scale of sub-regional by the government or whether they're looking for something larger. We will also get a sense from conversations with the officials from the Ministry for Cities, Environments, Regions and Transport, MCIT, about how the government perceives cross-boundary issues. And this is quite important for us because we obviously sit in 4 regions, and going forward, we're going to have to work out how, through an amalgamation or multiple amalgamation processes, we continue to interact with those 4 regions. So, sitting behind all of this is risk, and I talked about the uncertainty earlier. There are a number of risks that you need to think about in the context of your decision making. And the first is a legal one around significance. This is clearly a significant matter in terms of the Council's significance and engagement policy. As part of that, you're required under the Local Government Act to make sure that you're aware of the views and preferences of the community who might not only be affected but might have an interest in this matter. And I think, as we've seen to date through conversations, there is a lot of community interest in this matter. We've simply not had the time in the government's time frame to go and actively engage with the community on the depth of information that you've had presented in your report and today. That poses some real challenges for you in terms of your decision making. if you do decide to put in a proposal in August or join somebody else's proposal in August, and that is seen as successful by the Cabinet in September, our suggestion as officers is that there is another round of engagement with the community while more detailed design on that proposal is being developed. And that detailed design phase goes essentially from October through to March 2027. There are some real challenges in that, talking to our community about something that's already taking shape. But certainly that's our recommendation as officers as the best way to try and mitigate those risks around views and preferences. We talked about the election result and the uncertainty that that creates. There's also a whole lot of risk around the backstop process, around will it happen, what will it look like, when it will happen, how widespread will it be applied, will there be another opportunity to have more influence, or conversely, will the government simply dictate results across the country? So a lot of uncertainty around that. We're expecting that come September, if the officials from MCERT are looking at a range of proposals across the Waikato that impact Taupō, then we would expect to be engaging with those officials to express views around how those other proposals might impact our district. However, there is some risk that those officials choose not to engage with us or are directed not to engage with us. Longer term, there are risks that we get forced into an unattractive amalgamation. And that could be unattractive from a representation perspective or a financial perspective or a service delivery perspective. There is a sense at this point in the process that councils have a degree of leverage, an ability to negotiate with other councils to achieve the sort of outcomes that they're looking for in an amalgamation. If we end up in a process further down the track where the government is dictating the results and councils have no influence, then that negotiation ability will go out the window. And then the last risk is around success. So if you are part of a proposal in September that is successful and Cabinet says go forth and do the detailed design, you just need to be aware that that creates a whole lot of challenges for the organisation. There is a massive amount of work that would need to be done in a short space of time through to March 2027 to prepare a final proposal and iron out all of the details to ensure that a future amalgamation could actually be a success for the parties involved. So a massive amount of work. You have a very small window of time in which to do that, and the estimate is that you would need to look at hundreds of thousands of dollars of probably consultant time to help you get to that point in March. Now, through the last 3 months, Council's been able to utilise staff resources to be able to achieve the analysis that we've done to date. The reality is we could not do that if we were going to get into the detailed design phase. We would need to bring external assistance in and quite a lot of external expertise to assist with that. And a big reason for that is at the same time we're going to be trying to deliver a very challenging long-term plan for you, which will need to be consulted on about March and April next year. So that's, well, can I just say thank you for your time and patience, because we've dropped a lot of information on you, and I expect you will have some questions. So we're both happy to take any questions you might have at this stage.
Nick and Sarah, thanks very much for that. Also, I'd just like to record the appreciation of the many hours that you put in preparing this stuff for us, particularly on weekends and at night. Thank you for the commitment you and your team have made to pull all that together. It is appreciated. Are there any questions? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, in the paper, it's implied that we could become our own unitary. I think it would be useful for elected members to understand whether Taupō is presently a net contributor or net beneficiary of the current WRC regional services. But of course, if that affects any decision of our own to become our own unitary, not to mention if we could reasonably afford to provide those specialised services. And I already recall that a WRC chief executive, not in really strong words, but certainly implying it would be costly. It would cost more than we're currently charging, or that they are currently charging.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Campbell, and I did cover it briefly in my slide. As we said, the detailed district split wasn't available to us. So what we did is the best with the data we had, which we believe from a Taupō perspective shows quite strongly that we contribute a substantial share of the costs in relation to, substantial is probably the wrong word, a fair share of our costs in relation to ratepayers, particularly of that general good. Now, I guess it comes back to those regional council services, and they are providing things like coastal protection and other services that we aren't necessarily high users of. And again, we've done our best to look at the data based on our use, and we are comfortable as a team that we don't believe we're heavy contributors. If anything, we suspect it may be the other way around. Now, I just want to probably bring your attention to the amount of environmental protection and waterway protection that Tū Wharetoa also do. They spend several million in the Taupō district, and probably just noting that contribution probably does also make a difference to our regional costs.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Bishop. Sarah, it's more a question for you. I'm conscious that we have been inundated with information over the last several weeks, and much of it is financial modelling as well. And I'm also conscious that the models we get from around the region differ. I just wonder if you could comment on that and just help us get a handle on the fact that you're doing modelling, someone else is doing modelling, and the challenges that we've had to get some kind of apples with apples comparison. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and I did my best in the paper to explain. I probably did a better job than today, and apologies, I am a human. I did just come back from a trip which ended in some bereavement, so it just arrived in the country this morning, so apologies for probably my lack of preparedness for the presentation today. But yeah, from a comparability perspective, I did my best to outline exactly what we did and what we didn't do. Again, understand you guys have been provided a lot of information around the table in detail, even having the spreadsheet workings that we've worked from. From a Waikato perspective, I was on the working group that started doing the work for the whole of Waikato region, and again, that working group somewhat didn't continue beyond the initial stages, and I have seen the modelling that has been done from them as well as others, and there has been different points in time. So I'm aware some councils have taken 30th of June 25 off the latest annual reports. A lot of councils haven't pulled together all of the information that we have, or a range of different outcomes being provided. I guess that's why we did outline and supported with some independent things such as credit ratings and different metrics that support our assessment. So we're really comfortable in the work we've done.
Thank you, and I'm conscious that you're operating on very little sleep, having just got back. It wasn't having a crack, and I just want to support John's comments. Thank you for the extraordinary, incredibly detailed work you've done. So it is appreciated.
Councillor Delator, followed by Councillor Campbell.
Just to reiterate that, really, I think the a low level perhaps of questions of clarification is an acknowledgement of the information that we have had prior, the workshops we've had prior, just so the public know as well. We have had this information before, which has been massively appreciated. We've had the paper to read through, so I don't want the public to think that the lack of questions of clarification here are for any other reason than we probably feel really well briefed and in a position to have a discussion. So appreciate the work.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll just comment, Nick, you mentioned that, going forward from this, it's a heck of a lot of work to sort of prepare the detailed proposal and everything. I'm just suggesting that, well, it's a question and a suggestion that if we tagged on to somebody else's proposal, as if we were a minor member, which is a possibility, I'm just suggesting that the amount of work for staff here would be a heck of a lot less, because being a minor member of somebody else's proposal, I'm estimating
Councillor
they
Campbell,
would
this
be
is
doing
question
loads.
time. Have you got a question?
Well,
You're making
yeah,
statements, it's question time.
well, I'm questioning that the amount of work of staff in this council, if we're a minor member of a much larger proposal, would be substantially less than that they would be doing the lion's share of the work. Do you agree? Do you think that's a...
No, I don't
No?
agree. I think the reality is, if we're looking at future amalgamation partners, the nature of the proposal that's produced will depend on who's involved. And there may well be some partners who have done a lot of thinking about how their particular district could fit into a proposal, but I'm pretty certain they have not done a whole lot of thinking about how our district would fit into any such proposal. The reality is there are a lot of details to work out when you're bringing several organisations together, and I guess my point to impress upon you is not to underestimate the amount of work and investment that will be required to do that. This will not be a cheap exercise, and it's certainly not an exercise that the council has currently budgeted for in either time or financial resources.
Yeah, and I think through the chair, we can compare what was done in relation to the work on the previous Three Waters reform under the Labor government. You know, we spent a lot of time, and there were a lot of external consultants, government appointed officials that were supporting us with that process, but you know, noting a lot of the data and a lot of the information and a lot of the stuff that they needs to come from within Taupō District Council. So you know, the fact that we might not be paying for someone doing the future state work, we will be processing Taupō specific data and information and trying to support the process as best we can.
Councillor Greenslade, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. It's actually, that was sort of the question I was about to ask, and thinking that in fact we would not be doing this work in silo, that we would expect government officials to be supporting us, and if we had councils that we were intending to be amalgamating with, then we would expect those consultants to be across more than one council, not just our own council. Would you? I mean, it is, or would you agree? Because you know, it's following. That's the concern, because you said hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours of work, and hopefully we wouldn't be siloed in doing this work. We would be expecting to be working with other councils and with government departments.
It would absolutely have to be a collaborative exercise, but at the same time, you also need to understand what's important to your community. What are your positions, if we were talking about representation arrangements as an example? But what's important to your community? What's your negotiating positions? And you might not necessarily want to be using somebody else's advice for that. You might want to get your own advice.
That
was
it's
precisely.
negotiations. We've actually got to, come to an agreed point. So negotiations always involve somebody having to accept perhaps not an optimal situation. I mean, okay, and I get that. The second question I wanted to ask you, probably, Nick, was your comment that you made that the optimal size of a council is around 100,000. So when we're talking at standing alone, that is nowhere near the 100,000.
Yeah, I think probably just coming to our earlier point in relation to ratepayer numbers versus population, Taupō always is a little bit off balance. So an equivalent population to ratepayers would be Waipa, right? Again, we've got very, very similar ratepayer numbers. However, they have 20,000 more population. So I'd expect our rating servicing population equivalent to be around about the 63,000-ish. So yes, not quite there, but I think what Nick was referencing is that when it gets to 100,000 residents, the point of efficiencies is diminishing. So I just think that, again, that's been represented by, I think, New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, some studies that were done post the Australia amalgamations, particularly Victoria. So that kind of supports that 100,000. So you get benefit, efficiency, benefit, then you get to 100,000 and it kind of starts to flatten off.
And then it can go the other way. If your organisation gets too big, you end up with too many layers of decision making, which slows down innovation. You end up with more silos within an organisation because people become, or teams become more isolated from others. So integrated decision making can become more challenging. The agility of the organisation is not quite the same. So there are always trade-offs, right? Larger organisation, you've potentially got a bigger pool of professionals that you can call on. You've got less single-person risk. You've got more purchasing power. But at the same time, you've got less scrutiny over some of your purchasing. So there's the opportunity for bloating to take place. So that was essentially the point. Yeah. You can get some efficiencies by getting bigger, but if you get too big, then those efficiencies get outweighed by those other costs.
Yeah, and I think Councillor Green said if you read the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission report, it talks about some of local government's main cost drivers not actually being more efficient in their delivery when looking at a larger organisation, so the costs actually stayed relatively the same. So particularly, I remember they mentioned transportation, so roading costs per kilometre, those kind of things. That infrastructure still, doesn't reduce substantially just because you're larger in size. However, what they did say is density is what is a good predictor of costs. And again, we're not redesigning districts on where people live and how dense, your population is. So we're not supporting that. But yeah, and I guess that's why we wanted to model that financial state at a really optimistic efficiency, just to show, what could an ultimate efficient model best case look like, and then compare it to the current state.
Councillor Foreman.
Just noting that when we caught up with DIA, they said they would be helping us through this process and inputting. Just what has their advice been to date in what we've been doing? Have they provided any guidance?
So firstly, the MCERT officials from DIA have been, we have a very good working relationship with them. We've been able to bounce queries off them. I also just acknowledge that every council around the country is going through this process, so they are extremely busy working through this, but we have been able to work with them and to give them a heads up on what was at least coming from staff for today. If I may, while I've just got the mic, acknowledge Councillor Greenslade's comments around a single unitary authority. Just want to clarify that the way it's written is just acknowledging that the financial analysis shows that Taupō District Council could be a sustainable, viable, single unitary authority. It's not recommending that. The point was that we were trying to say is that we pay our fair contribution, we believe, based on the analysis that we've done, to regional council functions and the financial analysis that we're showing you here today. That's not necessarily what government's policy is. We're just trying to point out that financially we've been able to prove that case. So just to clarify, Councillor.
Councillor Foreman, you haven't got to say you're happy with that answer. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, look, just I think what you're saying, Nick, right, is about, and I've heard it described as the complexities of size. Once you get so large, it introduces complexities you didn't once have. And I've certainly seen, the silo effect up in Auckland Council happen. And I think the Auckland Council model is certainly not the best one which anyone should be replicating, but instead learn from. And in terms of finance, yes, finance is one aspect of it, but I do have an uncertainty in my mind if, okay, we've got the financial statements about debt and everything, but I'm not sure, Sarah might be able to answer this better, that we're probably taking into consideration that some of these councils with higher debt have much higher growth compared to councils with lower debt, but they've actually got longer term renewal pressures, and I just have to note, this angle of each council preparing their own financial statements is not exactly subjective. I have heard.
Councillor Campbell, can I remind you it is question time? We're not in debate.
Well, that was the
so
question.
Can you just put the question?
Before.
We need to move on. Is there a question there?
I've heard our approach described as by a neighbouring council as quite arrogant, and I suppose that's reflective of the fact that each little council is justifying their own existence, I suppose. But the question really is to do about the debt. You've got councils with higher debt, but they've actually also got much higher growth. So I'm not sure it's fair to lump them in as this is bad for Taupō because they've got higher debt.
Yeah, so through the chair, certainly not making any judgment as to how the council's got into debt, and many councils have challenges that are greater than Taupō district, and particularly in relation to growth. And having been at a very high growth council, that is challenging, and totally want to reiterate that we're certainly not pointing the finger at any council. But coming back to the challenges and coming back to the financial analysis, some of the things, so you think, Councillor Campbell, credit rating for instance, and that's an independent measure, and we've outlined kind of, a lot of detail in the report around that. That's that long-term financial sustainability, and it takes into account all factors like that, future financial considerations, growth. There's a lot of things involved in a credit rating assessment. I guess from an objectivity perspective, you guys have been provided the detail, and the detail is based off publicly available information. It's at a set point of time, 30th of June 2026. However, we have looked into different points in time and have provided a lot of detail around that. So certainly not trying to be arrogant from the perspective that, hey, we look much better than everybody else, because that's not what I'm saying. I guess all I'm showing is that even after model deficiency, Taupō District Council is in a really sound financial space, and that may be because we are more fortunate with some of the lack of challenges that we have. So it's totally not not trying to misrepresent that, that's for sure. And I think that's why we looked at the range of metrics and looked at asset condition and some of that future stuff, because some of those councils with higher debt also have good comparable asset condition too. But again, you've been provided all of that detail.
Councillor Campbell, do you have a supplementary question?
Just to respond to that, I mean, I think, Sarah, you flagged it right. Yes, we've been lucky. We haven't faced some of the challenges of a lot of other districts, and I mean, my own point of view is that, yes, we've got that very good credit rating, but it's been at the expense of ratepayers who I believe are just paying too much
Councillor Campbell, I do need to remind you, we're not in debate yet, and we've got other people out wanting to ask questions. Do you have a question?
No?
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question that Councillor Campbell was trying to get out there may have been something along the lines of, I wonder if there had been enough appetite for an independent assessor of all councils' financials, if that would have provided public and elected members more confidence and better clarity, although the work our team has done has been exceptional, 100%. Because you've got the problem where you've got councils doing their own financials, which doesn't always, I mean, we're showing our own work. So yeah, I think that was probably the question he was trying to get across. Also because we've got communities within our district who may think differently to this report say that we've got that shows that we're a great council, when we've got a few communities within our district who haven't always had the most investment.
Yeah, through the Chair, just responding to the objectivity piece, and again, noting you've had the detail behind, a lot of the stuff was based off public information. You've got in your spreadsheets, which you have been provided, AI checks on consistency and fairness. You've got internal peer reviews. Now, objectivity I find a really hard question personally. I'm a chartered accountant, that's why I said it at the start, because I live by a code of ethics. So I guess those questions of objectivity are a little bit challenging to me, and I've very well outlined what we did and didn't do. You guys have had all the detail behind it, able to check every single figure if you wanted to, and if you wanted to run it through AI. So, I mean, I don't know how much more I could have done to prove objectivity. If you wanted to spend $100,000 on a consultant to do that for you, you could have.
So can I just answer to just a reminder for those that are watching that our financials are obviously audited by they're audited independently. Sarah's referred to our credit rating, which is done independently too. So that might just give some reassurance. I understand the question. But equally, we had two options, one which was to hire someone in to do the work, and I'm certainly very pleased that we were able to do that with the resources that we've got without incurring costs to the community. So I understand the question though.
Yeah, through the Chair, the most subjective bit of work we did was around that asset condition, but that was why we put every single report we use into AI and did a fairness check across, and again, you were provided that fairness check, the output that AI provided.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a little bit different when you look at numbers, and you've got to look at the variables, and again, we've got communities who may not have the same thoughts about the outcomes or how things have been delivered within our community.
Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you, Worship. Nick, on page 16 of our document, in the last paragraph of legal considerations, it says, if Council decides to join a Head Start proposal, there would be the opportunity to undertake more detailed engagement during the design phase between October 26 and March 27 before deciding to submit a final proposal. Am I taken to understand this a Head Start? Is that telling us that we can only put in one proposal, or would you be of the opinion or understanding that we could put in more than one proposal under that category?
My understanding is that the expectation from government is that a council's involved in a single proposal. That doesn't prevent other councils naming you as part of their proposal, even if you're not supportive of that.
Okay.
But I think that statement at the end of the legal considerations section is about, I guess, about providing you with some guidance about how you tackle this tricky legal position that you've got around needing to understand the views and preferences of those who have an interest in the matter. And you've simply not had a chance to do that at this point in the process. So the suggestion from officers is that if you decided to progress with a proposal, that you made that subject to further engagement with the community. Now that's based on the assumption, and assumption's always dangerous, but it's based on the assumption that Head Start is a voluntary process and that you may choose to get to the March 2027 deadline and not submit a final proposal.
Well, that's exactly why I asked you that question, because it strikes me that one may not be sufficient, and that's pretty much what that actually says, that you're going to make a final decision later on. But if you're only going to look at one proposal, that really leaves you hung out to dry, doesn't it?
It certainly makes it more challenging because you're then invested in that proposal.
Exactly.
But to be honest, that's the point of the Head Start process. Remember, as I said near the beginning, the Head Start process is designed for those councils who have been talking about this for a number of years, are well aligned in what they're trying to achieve, have worked through a lot of these details. That's what the government said when they came out with this in May. That was their target audience. Now, because of the way the government's announced it, we've had some rippling effects throughout the rest of the sector, which has led us and councils like us to undertake the sort of analysis that we've done.
Okay. I still think we should look at more than one under that statement. Thank you.
Just remind councillors again, we're not in debate yet, so it'll be Councillor Leonard next, followed by Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So there's been ongoing conversations with DIA and the new entity that's been established to look after councils. Have we had any indication that should we go with a Head Start or a backstop option, that we're able to contribute to the governance structure of said entities should there be a change moving forward?
So certainly the government's guidance document, which is attached to the report, talks about more detailed design on a representation approach as part of that work that you would do between October 26 and March 27. But your proposal that you put in August is intended to give all the parties involved and the government enough confidence that you've talked about representation and that you're aligned about how to approach that. You might not have every detail down, but you're at least aligned as a set of councils making a proposal around how you're going to approach representation. So there is a window to do more work, but you should certainly be aligned with your other council partners.
I was going to say, through the chair, from a backstop.
Can I just clarify that that's just representation versus governance?
Oh, I think both. Councillor Leonard, sorry, I was just going to jump in because you did ask about backstop too, and from a backstop perspective, as Nick said earlier, no details have emerged regarding that, so we have no idea.
Can I perhaps just add too, so I guess, that last slide is perhaps what I wanted to refer back to. That's your risk, right? You've got a risk-based decision to make today. At this point in time, through Head Start, you could potentially negotiate something. We're saying we haven't got to a proposal, for you to consider with signatures on the page. And so, the option there is you run the risk through backstop, and that's pretty much the conversation you're going to have today. So just wanted to refer back to that last slide because I think that's the important one. Thanks, Nick.
Councillor Rankin.
I'm just turning something I want to say into a question, Sarah. So the strength of our finances is not trying to indicate that we've done everything right in the past or invested everywhere we should have, because I think there are a lot of places that would say either we're spending too much or we're not spending enough. But you're not trying to indicate that. You're showing the position we're in as we move forward. So it's actually, I just don't want us to get hung up on that. So I'm assuming that you're showing our strength, not that we've been perfect in our administration or our investment.
Yeah, absolutely, and not that there's not opportunities to do better, because there absolutely is. But again, that's why we wanted to look at the various options and do various financial metrics, and operating cost per rating unit's a really good metric, because that again shows the cost to service each ratepayer, and even after generous efficiencies, Taupō as a standalone was the more favourable out of the other options. So a range of metrics were assessed. There's a range of independent things, as Julie pointed out before, that we've made sure that we've outlined in the report to ensure objectivity. We've also provided probably more transparency from a financial perspective than I imagine many other councils received, and we've tried to do a really good job for the community in outlining what we have and haven't done, and again, the why we've taken a specific point in time. That's not to say other councils' modelling's wrong either.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nick. Councillor Campbell, you did have a...
Not a question.
Well, the debate is coming shortly. Has the table got any questions at all before we move on into debate? Okay, thank you for that.
One more question, Your Worship, and I don't know whether staff can answer it or not. Is it possible for us to go forward on this day and say we are in the Head Start program, but we don't know what that looks like at this moment in time?
I think what you've got in front of you as a set of draft recommendations from officers is essentially that outcome. It's a proposal to write to the government, express some views about the process that we've been in, to talk about how further work's required to better understand what our future looks like, and ask for the opportunity to have the time and space to be able to do that. That's essentially what the recommendations in front of you are trying to achieve.
Through the chair, can I? My pseudo question was kind of related to that too. So look, my understanding of the rules of the game, the Head Start game, is that if we don't come forward with a amalgamation proposal, then it doesn't matter what you call it, like a letter, a suggestion. It's a backstop. It's a backstop. We're backstopped, and our future is not in our hands after that. I mean, that's as simply as I see it.
There are a couple of slides where I talked about uncertainties and risks, and the reality is nobody knows. In fact, even the government doesn't know, because the government doesn't know whether they will be the government. We've seen some clear policy intent, and that policy intent has talked about if you're not part of this first round called Head Start, where you volunteer, then the government said that we'll make sure that everybody in the sector is being reformed through another process. So no one's going to get left behind. You don't get to slide around the edge of this and avoid it. That's been the government's direction. Now, that's not to say that there won't be further opportunities to influence the next round of whatever it is, given that it's yet to be designed. But, as Julie says, there is some risk in that we know the process that we're in now with Head Start. We don't know the details or the timing or the design of the next process. So it's that trade-off between what you know, which might not be particularly palatable, versus what you don't know, which could be even more unpalatable.
Councillor Westerman. Sorry, Councillor Campbell.
Most probably it could be a legal question when the government is saying we'll legislate for councils not progressing through the Head Start to enter into a compulsory backstop process after the 2028 local elections. So legally, how can we choose backstop when we don't know legally what that's going to entail for our community? So, why would they throw that at us? Why would they make us go into a position where legally we don't know what the backstop is?
Probably need to be a little bit careful here, in that I obviously can't speak on behalf of the government and their policy intent. I think the reality is that at this point we've got policy intent from government, and the government has said that they intend to back that up with legislation. Now, until that legislation's in place, nobody has certainty. I'm not sure I could or should go much further than that.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Leonard, do you have a question?
Do we have any indication as far as the capacity of central government to deal with, should every council propose a Head Start proposal, what their actual capacity is to be able to deal with the legislation and the unintended consequences of that decision?
The indications to date have been that the government has got the capacity to deal with a few of these, 3 or 4, maybe 5 amalgamation proposals going forward. That has been the indication at an official level. It's certainly not been stated in the government's policy document. But there are some practical realities around trying to deliver new unitary authorities ahead of the 2028 election. There are also real challenges for the sector trying to deliver the new planning system over exactly the same time frame. And as we've seen through the Select Committee report back on the Planning Bill and the Natural Environment Bill, while a little bit more time, I think 6 months was built into that transition period, we are going to be moving hard and fast as a sector to deliver that. Now, the reality is that we could not do wholesale amalgamation right across the country and deliver that once-in-a-generation transformation in terms of our planning system at the same time. We simply could not do that in parallel. So the reality is, I think, that the government is looking for a small number of proposals which are highly likely to be successful to then promote going forward.
Councillor Leonard, I think we can also make assumptions around the capacity of New Zealand to deliver, massive technological transformation, data transfer, all the consultants and technological experts in the, being able to actually support that seems challenging from our perspective. But again, just making assumptions as of what capacity we have to deliver those. But quite substantial numbers, as you would have seen in the costs involved, and that goes towards resourcing those changes.
Councillor Greenslade, followed by Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Worship. You mentioned the control gates in the middle of your presentation, Nick. As councillors for a TA, we know what our role is and we know what our function is. Have you had any conversations with the Waikato Regional Council staff on the functions that we are not involved in? Because I think that's probably my greatest concern, is how those functions are going to be incorporated into a new model.
Yes, there are real challenges, particularly if we're looking at sub-regional options across the Waikato. There's going to have to be some sort of coordination between multiple sub-regional unitaries to deliver those functions. Now, I know, talking to colleagues in the Bay of Plenty, that they've been looking at a model whereby the existing council, the regional council, moves into a CCO model, council-controlled organisation, and there's a period of contracting between that organisation and the new unitary authorities. So that's one possible model, but certainly across the Waikato, we've not got to the point where we've worked that out. Now, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that anybody putting in a sub-regional proposal through Head Start is going to have to cover off exactly that point. And I think this just speaks more to the fact that we're in a position where there is a lot of conversation that still needs to go on to understand how we could realistically deliver new unitary authorities in the sort of time frame that the government's talking about with 2028. Simply, we're not ready at this point.
Thank you for that. I noticed both the mayors from the Waikato that are sitting in the room nodding their heads there. So, Councillor Woodward, you next. Councillor Merch.
Thanks. Thanks, guys, for the presentation. I'm really trying to absorb the overload of information. I just had a question, and it's about the process that this council took in 2021 when it unanimously rejected Three Waters on similar grounds, and that the pace was rushed, cost efficiencies were overstated, and that local voice would be lost in a larger entity. And my question is just around the situation and the strategic approach. What is substantively different about this situation that leads staff to recommend a slightly different strategic approach, specifically not building like a formal coalition as we did back when we opposed Three Waters?
Thanks, Councillor. I guess I would actually advocate that is actually a similar challenge. So if you look at where we landed with Three Waters, we were able to prove that we had financial viability as a standalone or go-it-alone entity, as in status quo. So I think that speaks to the strong financials and probably similar strategic approaches where when we look at it, and again look at it objectively, because that process obviously had a panel to go through to get past. When we look at it objectively, actually Taupō Council is in a really strong financial space. So I think strategically I wouldn't have placed them being very different at all. As far as end result. Yeah.
Thank you for that to the staff, Sarah and Nick. I'd ask you to stay at your table because I think there's going to be further questions. Now, we have got the recommendation on the screen. Is there... Oh, sorry, Councillor Foreman.
Just one question for you two. Having done this exercise, I was wondering whether or not you found any efficiencies across councils that we aren't already using that we can possibly start digging into, like after this has all kind of blown over.
Thank you. I think it's been well known all the work we do together from a regional perspective. So if you look at BOP, LAS or Bay of Plenty, local authority shared services, and obviously CoLab and Waikato, and work that councils already do together, there is a lot going on. Could we do better? Absolutely. And I think there's certainly a space for continuing that conversation. Along with obviously percentage of efficiency gain, just generally from cost savings that we do think amalgamation could provide. There's certainly structural savings that could be achieved upon amalgamating councils. You think of overlap of management staff, for example, and the like. So certainly you could see cost efficiencies from that perspective. But certainly more to do in the shared service space if we and other councils willingly wanted to band together for that. But I guess challenged by the fact that we're looking at future structural change on top of that.
I was just going to add slightly more political statement on that, and that we have a work plan of stuff that we wanted to do, particularly in the Bay of Plenty, because we're part of BOPLAS in the Bay of Plenty. We identified high priority actions that we wanted to do, and that work is unsurprisingly on hold while everyone looks at Head Start. So just really wanted to make a point that has diverted resource and a different way of thinking about things depending on where councils fall after the decisions by the 9th of August, we'll be able to pick that up again. But just really acknowledging that this has had an impact on terms of some of the work that we've been doing.
Councillor Mitch.
Sorry, I'm just going to go back to my question that I asked Sarah, because I feel like I don't think that I received kind of the answer that I was looking for, and I'm just going back to the recommended strategic approach in this paper. I'm just going to try and rephrase it. What is substantively different between that situation with Three Waters and now? What's substantially different in terms of the advocacy approach? Because back then, when we did Three Waters, we built a coalition and we advocated as a coalition and we were successful. Why have we not considered that now, or have we considered that now?
I think a big part of the challenge has been the 3-month time frame, and while we say 3 months, it took council some time to wrap their heads around what is this process and where do we fit within it. And I think as the weeks have gone by, we've seen an acceleration of communication between councils as we've sort of established our own positions and tried to work out how do we come together on this. So I think coming out of the Merrill Forum, I believe there is a statement which is articulating where the mayors across the Waikato sort of sit in terms of this process and some of the challenges but the opportunities going forward. So there's certainly work that's being done to look at how do we present a more joined up view when we go towards government. Even if government might get multiple proposals from the Waikato, there's still an opportunity to express a more joined up view around some of those basic principles. And when we come back, if we come back to you on the 6th, there's an opportunity to present that as well. And I know a similar approach is being taken down in the Manawatu-Wanganui region and across other parts of New Zealand as well. So while there are some differences to how we were able to approach the Three Waters conversation, which evolved over years rather than months, there are definitely some similarities.
Through the chair, if I may, just given that I was around at that time, I would suggest the difference is that the government put their proposal out and then asked us to submit and give our opinion. So I'd say that's what's materially different this time, is that we haven't been asked for our input, we've just been told to do it.
So, through the chair. So if I may, and Nick worked with me on this, sorry, I don't want to answer on behalf of staff, but the significant difference, as Councillor Cameron has said, is the end result, the outcome was predetermined in Three Waters. This is what the end result will be, you are heading towards this. Here, we don't have any end result, we have an unknown future and we're to design it. The other thing is that all of the costs, including the debt, was going to be met by central government. So that was going to be taken off councils and separate water entities, of which we would have been part of Entity B, with all of the other Waikato councils. And then there was a change of government and everything changed. Bit of deja vu, really.
If it's okay, I might just also add, I was reflecting while you were asking your question, Councillor Murch, right back at the beginning when we made a call about whether we were going to engage in this process or not. And so that the time that you were making that decision, we talked about other councils working through their processes and potentially they would be naming Taupō as an option. And so I just reflecting back in terms of what's different about this process is that aspect was slightly different in the waters space, and so I feel at times, particularly being in 4 regions, we're responding to what other councils see as an option for us as opposed to what we see might be best for our communities, and I think that has a different flavour through this process than what the waters process did.
Thank you, Julie. Are there any more questions before we go into debate? If not, we've got the recommended motion on the screen there. Is there a seconder? A mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Cameron, And a second to Councillor Delator. Right, we're happy to go into debate. I'll ask the staff to stay there. I'm sure there will be ongoing questions. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I think the government's initial intentions with the Head Start pathway of allowing those ready to amalgamate was justified. I do support that. I also support simplifying local government. I think it's a big tick from me as well because it's unnecessarily very complicated. But the direction to do it or have it done to you, it's created a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, especially within 90 days, and I'd argue that it was a political decision, not necessarily focused on outcomes, actually. However, we've engaged fully in this process, as is evidenced by your work and as evidenced by the presentation today, and I thank you very much for that. But by the government's own criteria, we're clearly not ready. We're not ready to amalgamate. We need more time. We need more public input, and we need a better democratic process for our communities, I feel. I don't wish to fall into the backstop position because it's completely unknown to us, and that's the problem. If we had a better understanding of what that looked like, that might have been a good option for us. But under the circumstances, I agree with the recommendation. We don't know what the next government's going to look like. We don't know what the intention of that government is going to be. So let's help them out. Let's give them some direction on what is going to work for us. Let's look, we've done the deep dive. We can see exactly what's going to work and what isn't. So let's do exactly what the recommendation says, point out that this process was flawed from the start, the time frame wasn't adequate. I don't believe it was even constitutional, to be fair. I don't believe the government even had a mandate to look at local government representation without consulting. But however, here we are. So I think that offering a submission to this government for the next government to reference, because I'm not so naive as to think that amalgamation isn't going to happen. I believe it will. So let's give our direction now, even if we aren't ready with a Head Start proposal. So I'll be voting in favour of the recommendation as evidenced by moving it. Thank you.
Can I just, under the standing orders, you get the chance to make one comment only before we go to the vote. So Councillor Campbell, you're next.
Through the chair, one comment only. This is the biggest decision of local government in the last 40 years. I had more than one comment to make, actually.
We'll go ahead and make it.
So I've got to say it all at once? Really?
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to call this, I don't really think of that as much of a debate. But I'll start with my first thing, actually, and it's a recommendation to the chair, because we have the mayors of Waipa and Waikato here right now in the room, and I'm aware that Taupō is falling within their proposal for a larger Waikato River unitary proposal called, I think it's Lake to the Ocean, and I think there is actually a very good chance it will be accepted by government. So I was going to recommend to the chair that we invite the mayors to say a few minutes to us, because I think that could help our discussions, actually. That was my first thing, but I'll wait. Okay, we're meant to be talking about Waikato's long-term constitutional future, and by the way, Rachel, I think the staff recommendation effectively is putting us into backstop. There's no other way I see that. That's the rules of the game. Look, it seems to me everyone has been focused on immediate politics and what they stand to lose, and I think that's blinded them to seeing what there is to gain of this. I actually think those who aren't even able to see the shortcomings of the present arrangement also aren't able to see the opportunities the government is presenting with us with this Head Start process, and it is a very real opportunity. Let's acknowledge the amount of work staff have put in a tight time frame, and I agree with many of the concerns in this report, which are legitimate: rushed timetable, uncertain protection of local assets and local voice. There's even a note about travel distance for elected members and loss of jobs from the local economy. However, where I respectfully differ is not over the risks, but over the opportunity. The report, as I read, essentially assumes the government governance models on offer are the traditional ones, but they simply don't have to be. The report rightly points out that protecting communities requires much more than simply ring-fencing debt, and I agree. But that is precisely why governance design matters, and why we need to start by first principles and examine function before form, and I think a lot of that's been the other way around. Bigger can be better, because it would enable access to increased level of professionalism that we aren't currently used to, and certainly also have an increased influence in Wellington. There's even a minister for Auckland. A Waikato unitary model with subsidiarity or local voice at its core could actually improve local voice, not just retain it, with strengthened local boards, community committees, and properly delegated budgets and decision making. And for me, that is the gold standard to which I believe this staff report has not attempted to compare. I'll just finish off here. I won't finish off here, actually. I've got two things to say. Over the last fortnight, I've developed a governance framework called Waikato Together, which is actually very similar to Axel's Lake to the Ocean proposal, only differing by geographic boundaries. They're both proposals about constitutional design and demonstrate that a large region can preserve local democracy if powers and funding are genuinely devolved, so that Hamilton's population doesn't automatically dominate every decision. And I note with interest that the Lake to Ocean proposal we've converged on the same underlying principles, which are stronger local voice, protected delegations, and a regional body focused only on genuinely regional functions. So I will finish here. I'm seeing this. The government has given us a chance to come up with a proposal in an albeit short time frame. But anything else than an actual amalgamation proposal is backstop, no matter how many frills you want to add to it. So I think if we follow the staff recommendation, it's a failure, a missed opportunity to restart our council in a new way and do things better. There you go.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do feel funny about only one comment and having to rattle all this out. Some of it might get lost, and but I'll just do my best. This process, obviously we heard it 100 times, it's rushed. We're about to make a decision that will affect local government for the next 50-something years. This is not a process that should happen in 2 or 3 months or even a year. We should have definitely more time over this. And as I was saying before, we need to have really independent assessors to be providing us this information, and they're the ones who should be paying for that as well. It shouldn't be put on local government. Central government seems to put a lot on local government, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for local government to really collaborate and rebuild how we do things and push back against central government in many ways. There are many things they ask us to do that are actually not our responsibility, nor do they fund us for it. We are left in the lurch quite a lot from them. If they're going to decide to change a governance structure this significantly without meaningful local participation, that undermines the democratic principles behind the Local Government Act. There is no legislation currently. We've already spent a lot of time and a lot of money on this, and we should have just pushed them back from the very beginning, in my personal opinion. We need to look at what problem we're actually trying to solve, because at first it seems they are just asking us to redraw a map, and that's not the problem. We have a problem with the system. The system is what's broken, and the system is what needs fixing, but we need to identify the problems within that system that need fixing first. We're doing it the wrong way around. And from my wee community's point of view, I'm the Mangakino Pauakani Ward Councillor, and in my community, if you asked anybody in my community, do we have a strong community already and will the amalgamation make us stronger? I'm confident that many people will say no, unfortunately. We are one of the smaller parts of our district, and we struggle quite a bit, we feel, to have our representation and investment into our community. So there's certainly pros and cons of amalgamation. And lastly, I feel like this is such a hard thing to just put into one comment and not be able to continue to debate this. Also, this is not a debate if we're just making statements. Central government can set the direction, but local government reform should be done with councils and communities, not to them.
Councillor Rankin.
I agree absolutely that we need more time, and I don't agree that amalgamation is going to solve the issues that local government have, which are quite considerable. Culture and leadership and the breakdown of bureaucracy is what will change it, and I agree with Duncan that it does give us some opportunities. High-performing organisations don't exist because of a structure or somebody creating some great big organisation, and I've experienced it many, many times. I also think we're being naive to believe the government can't do what it wants, when it wants, how it wants. I worked in those halls, as a way of describing it, for many years. Believe you me, they say to their chief executives, this is what I want, find me the way to do it. And it doesn't matter what happens out and about, they will get what they want, how they want, and they have actually every right to do that. So we need to be smart about that, not thinking it's not going to happen and they won't do it. My only real concern about this is that there is a reality that we're going to be stuffed in somewhere that we don't want to be. And having experienced, and I've said it to you before, Labor's attack, as I call it now, on health, their complete restructure of health, which is going to take us a generation to recover from, and people begged them not to do it. They were literally begged, and they did it anyway. And you and I are living with health because of what that government decided to do. So we also need to be realistic that if we don't play the game, they can easily play it for us, and I believe that they will. So I don't want us to be naive about that. Our community has every right to be frightened that we're going to end up in a much worse position, but I do think we've done a lot of fantastic work. I admire what the staff has done so much, but we also have to understand that big politics is different than little politics. Thank you.
Councillor Menanui.
While central government's intent may have merit for councils that were already looking to amalgamate, Taupō was not one of them. It was also stated several times that the Waikato region is one of the more complex. Alongside this, the time frame given has been far too short. Engagement and due diligence with neighbouring councils has been difficult, so we would ask that central government takes a considered view of what we put forward. For those that have not been embedded in this process, including our community, there's been a lot of work, and through no fault of our own, this process has been a moving feast right up until today, we've seen. And it will continue through the week as other councils get together. Given the constraints, this is a strong and comprehensive report, and once again I'd thank Nick and Sarah in particular for the hard work and report presented. It assesses all 4 options we requested. The analysis shows that none of the options is currently feasible or likely to leave the Taupō community better off. Importantly, the analysis has properly tested a broad range of options, and this has made it easier to stand options up alongside a backstop rather than simply defaulting to opposition. Hopefully this demonstrates Council has taken responsibility for examining every pathway rather than moving immediately to opposition without evidence. One of the clearest questions from our community has been whether amalgamation would benefit Taupō financially. Based on this report, the answer is clearly a no. The analysis also shows that submitting our own future proposal would be materially different from having an arrangement imposed through the backstop process. And back to my comment about this being a moving feast, this seems even supported even more so with more recent DIA discussions right up until last week. Today's decision is not the end of this conversation. We hope it is simply the next step. There is still more work to do as government finalises and figures out its direction, and we remain committed to continuing this work. We will keep looking for opportunities that strengthen Taupō's future, protect our community's interests, and ensure that if change does come, we are in the strongest possible position to shape it rather than simply respond to it. And so with that, I'll be supporting the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Mananui.
Yep, I can go.
Councillor Greensleeve.
Thank you, Worship. The sentiments coming through around the table seem to be fairly common. I think the point that we could make is that on the 30th of June we gave staff work to do. They've gone away, they've done it, it's been fantastic. They've spent a huge amount of time, and quite literally a huge amount of water has gone under that bridge since the 30th of June. And each day we learn new things, each day we talk to different people. I have engaged with other councils, I have engaged with other councillors, I have also engaged with some of our regional councillors, both in Waikato Regional Council and in Horizons. And each day we have these conversations, and each day the water is even more. As far as I don't normally speak like this, but on this occasion I will, as the Turangi councillor, I am extremely concerned about local representation. The situation that I have there at present where, and I know we're all elected to right across the whole district, but in reality it doesn't actually work like that. The district from Hātepe right around to Waihaha and everything in between and all of the people in between has been extremely challenging, and I found that the workload for a single councillor for area that size has been really probably a little bit too much than what most councillors would expect to do. I'm not complaining about it, I'm stating a fact. Representation is going to be the highest priority from my point of view. When I look at the unitary plan, the first one that we've got, the Waikato Regional Council model, if I was to drive from Turangi to Cape Colville, it would take me 6 hours to drive there. That's if the roads were open. So, you know, that actually to me is not an option, and I don't think going forward we should be considering that option. However, I do think that we should be looking at the catchment, and I think always when you're talking about these sort of responsibilities that are going to be given to us, the catchment is the essential way to look. I can see why Waitomo and Otrahanga are going together. I personally will be very surprised if they can get that across the line. 20,000 people is really not probably what the government is looking at, although I know they've been in love with each other for a while. When you look at the fact that we are the source of the Waikato River, and you go down and you look at South Waikato and go through to Hamilton and to Waikato and Waipa, and I acknowledge the two mayors here in the room today, and thank you very much for them for coming and being gracious enough to listen to our representations. I acknowledge that that in itself seems to be a very sensible way for us to look going forward, and that has changed from the 30th of June. We are now the 28th of July, that's 30 days, is a heck of a long time. Heck, a lot of water have gone under the bridge. The Waikato River Authority needs to be taken into account, and I don't know if any of you have been following Plan Change C, and that's another joyous moment that's going on up there at present as well too. We haven't been able to cover all options because of timing. The timing is completely unrealistic and being pushed through by a government ahead of an election is completely unrealistic. And again, I was involved in the same situation as Councillor Taylor said about the water services. What a nightmare that was. We were working right through and up until the last moment, and then the government changed it. Not all the work was wasted, but a large portion of it is wasted. I have gone through the recommendations very clearly and very, very carefully. There are 16 points on that recommendation, and we do have a subsection there, subsection 8. I've put a tick and a cross next to the subsections, each one of them. 16 points. I disagree with 10 of them, and I only agree with 6 of them. So I will be actually voting against the recommendations. It's a bit of a shame they've all been lumped together like that. I would have much preferred that they would have been individual recommendations so that I could have actually expressed my view on each one of them. The problems facing us are huge, absolutely massive. No one underestimates that, but I think looking at a pragmatic approach, function over form, and local representation are going to be my 2 highest priorities.
Thank you, Councillor Greenslade. Councillor Taupō.
Thank you. Yeah, the feedback from community was clear, and that was financial prudence and responsibility was the number one priority for them. And I haven't seen any evidence of an option that would achieve this, which for the community, which is why I'll be recommending or supporting the recommendations. I think putting a submission with all the work that we've done and what's outlined there is the best of probably a really tricky and there's no option with it without that doesn't have risk. Not only because of the sheer considerable cost of the actual amalgamation, but also what Sarah's outlined with the modelling, and if we were selected to be part of Head Start, the further excessive costs that Nick has outlined as well. The Head Start proposal in my mind was for those that were already in discussions, as Nick has said. I think it's really important to know that there'll be three, they've indicated 3-ish regions around the country that will be part of Head Start, and I just don't think that's the right place for us, or that would actually get selected. The communication was unfortunate from central government at the time of the release. I think it really wasn't particularly useful. And I hope that our submission is taken, is well received, is read through, and that we can continue to be part of the process of simplifying government. As I say, there's no option without risk, but I'll be supporting the recommendation as it allows more time, and I see it as the most financially and responsible thing to do in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Delatour. Councillor Westerman.
As per my previous conversation, I think the backstop option isn't an option because we don't know what we're talking about. So I'm definitely going to go with the recommendation, although I do just wonder about 8B with all the chat recently, watering down of iwi partnership agreements that are already in place and what the government are thinking going forward on that. And I do sort of wonder whether the words engaging the community and iwi to build understanding, I just wonder whether we've missed a word in there, just to ensure that we recognise that we do need further communications with them.
Are there any council moves?
Thanks. My head is literally spun. Like, can I just be straight up and say that? I came into this debate knowing obviously the 4 different options that we were going to conduct the deep dive analysis into, and I thank the staff for presenting the findings of that analysis work. It is definitely apparent that under any amalgamation scenario, none of them are financially viable, and I think that's important. I do especially acknowledge Christine's comments in that amalgamation isn't the answer. I do agree, though, that the simplification of local government needs to happen. Things are so hard for the Taupō district, and I just kind of wonder or think about, the opportunity lost if we don't kind of put up a design, a model for us that is going to work in the long-term future. I'm not talking about an immediate response. I'm not talking about, you know, the immediate costs, because this is a generational decision and we have to be able to consider the sacrifices that we're going to make today so that the future of this district and the children that grow up here are going to have a process that's much easier to engage with, a council that's much easier to get a hold of, because the way that we're structured at the moment, it's not working. It's not working, and I'm gravely concerned that if we write letters of concerns, express frustrations, they're going to be read and filed. So I guess my only real issue with this recommendation today is that I want to know that we're not only going to be writing letters, expressing our concern, presenting our findings, but we're going to initiate an active campaign against this flawed process. I truly believe that writing a letter and expressing our concern is not enough. If this council is serious in the fact that, you know, we don't appreciate the process, well, we need to campaign about that. I think we need to do more than writing letters. I think we need to do more than sending our CE to go down and meet with ministers in government who may just not pick up the phone, because that's a reality as well. I don't want us to be naive as well. I think that if we're going to take this approach, we need to be strong about it. We need to be super clear and specific in our letter, and we need to carry on advocating in person, meaning all of these councillors around the table, in the car and down to Parliament. That's what I'm thinking. That's you know, if you want to go there, then let's be radical about it, because ain't nobody no radical like us. Trust me. And if not just this council, but this whole town. If our community is serious about you know, not wanting to amalgamate with anyone, well then let's start a walk. Let's get together and let's get down to Parliament and go to the steps of Parliament and you know, advocate against it. And that's why I brought up the Three Waters, because we did something similar to that. And I felt like that it's a similar situation. And there are councils who are thinking similarly to us. Which is why, you know, I brought that into the fold, because I need to know that we, you know, if we are going to make this decision, we are going to do it with our chest, and we're going to go all the way to the steps of Parliament. I just don't think that a letter of frustration is enough.
Thank you, Councillor Mertz, for your passion. One of the options we have got is to go through those recommendations one by one. What's the feeling of the room on that? Or by a group of them at a time? Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the rest of them to unpick, but I just want to acknowledge, actually, besides the work that the staff have done on this, which everybody I think now has acknowledged, we have actually had a lot of community leaders, iwi, hapu, putting a lot of work into these proposals and trying to unpack them and provide some really quick advice to us, which, although we've probably smoothed over quite quickly in these we have all taken on, and, well, I hope we have all taken on and digested. But the other thing that's concerning me is the recommendations that are up on the board might not necessarily make it very clear to our community what we're deciding on today. Many of them are probably wondering, why are we not just doing A, B, C or D? So I just want to probably point out that it doesn't really sit well with me that we can't make that decision. And I understand and acknowledge the reasonings why we haven't been able to get to that point. But effectively, we're not going to be putting a proposal in because we can't for Head Start. But we are wanting to put the recommendations forward on why we don't want to be lumped in or not considered moving forward. So going through each of those probably would be good to make sure we are happy with the way those are worded, because some of them may have shifted.
Councillor Greenslade, you had...
Yes, Your Worship. Yes, Your Worship. That was my point.
Councillor Campbell.
That was my
Did
point. They're quite
you
different.
were the ones that raised the issue. Is an option to do that in pieces at once or not?
Well, through until 8, and then of course you've got an issue with 8 because it's A, B, C, D, E, F, and they've sort of, so yeah, and some of them I agree with and some of them I don't. So yeah, I am concerned, and that's my point, that what we asked people to do on the 30th of June, there's been a move and things have changed slightly, and the opportunity for people to express a view on each item would be appreciated, I think.
Yeah, well, look, I just want to express...
Sorry, I was just going to supplementary to that, if it's...
Yeah.
If
Like
you've got
way.
just supplementary to what Sandra was saying, could I suggest that we identify the topics or the items that people have a problem with rather than going through one by one, just to narrow that down a wee bit? Because Sandra's identified which she has a problem with, and if anyone else has a problem with any of those points, we can address them that way.
Councillor Greenslade, can you list the ones you have a problem with?
Yes, Your Worship, 4, 5 and 6. I don't agree with 4, 5 and 6. And in 8, 8A is fine, B is fine. I don't like C, I just don't like it, I'm not sure, yeah. I don't agree with D. So that's the point I'm making. I mean, and they're all quite different, actually. They are quite different. So, I mean, that's just me. Other people might feel differently.
I guess I would just ask what is wrong with them. Just saying they're not good enough or you don't like them. I'd like to understand why and what you would like to achieve instead.
Well, I don't agree with the statements that acknowledges that under the current circumstances the Taupo district community would likely be worse off. That is the view of the staff. That's not necessarily the view of the councillors. That's the view of the staff. That is the view of the staff. Yes, acknowledges that the financial analysis shows that Taupo district could be a sustained and viable unit authority. I have just been made aware of the agenda of Waikato Regional Council agenda on their meeting on Thursday. They would disagree with that, and I also would disagree with that. When you look at the responsibilities for a Waikato for the Regional Council at present, I can't even begin to imagine how we could possibly do what they do. 6 confirms that if required to mount and I definitely disagree with the sub-regional unity authority. I totally disagree with that. So those are my views as a councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Greenslade. Councillor Campbell.
Well, look, I just want to say that this in no way or form can be considered a debate, but a series of expressed views. That's what this is. This is not a debate. I mean, I think some of the table are missing the point that this is actually an opportunity. Head Start is actually an opportunity to make council better, and by doing this, we're passing it by. This is because this is effectively a backstop position, leaving our future to others. And look, I want to apologise to the mayors of Waipa and Waikato for coming a long way for fairly questionable worth.
Thank you. Councillor Murch.
I guess I don't have any serious issues with the points noted, but I guess I'm looking for something that specifically says that this council is going to actively engage in opposition to the process. And what that might look like, I don't know, but I just feel like the expressions of letters and whatnot isn't enough to satisfy what I'm thinking in terms of a campaign against the process.
Okay, that's acknowledged. We are actually running out of time because we've got another meeting starting.
We cannot run out of time on the
No,
biggest
we've got another
decision
meeting.
of local government.
At one.
We may have to adjourn.
So just through you, Your Worship, we can manage the process. The intention was to let this meeting roll and finish. We acknowledge that this is a very important decision
Yeah.
and you need the time to do that. We will, at 1, if needed, open the council meeting and then suspend that meeting and continue this debate. So there is a plan, just we'll work through that if we need to.
I'm aware of that, but at 1 we're going to have to stop and go to the other meeting and then come back and have a break in between. So. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just listening to the voices around the table and the concerns, I'd like to bring everyone back to the whole purpose here, and that is, do we have a Head Start proposal or do we not? And if I look at the government's criteria as to how that proposal should be delivered, there are 5 criteria. The first is deliverability, and the proposals need to be realistic and demonstrate how new arrangements can be implemented in a timely manner. We can't do that. Supports a new planning system, shows clear support of implementing the new planning system, including progress on spatial and natural environment plan development, and avoids or minimises disruption to that work. We can't do that. Simplifies local governance, proposes more efficient regional governance arrangements, consolidating decision making and improving alignment between regions' councils. We can't do that. Economies of scale, supports regional strategic planning and effective delivery of key regional functions. We can't do that within this time frame. Maintains local voice, well, this is the complete opposite of that. So by the measure of the government's own criteria, we don't have a Head Start proposal. Not least we don't have other councils that we would prefer to work with wanting to work with us. I don't know how the jigsaw pieces are going to fall at the end of this process, but the reality is we don't have a Head Start proposal. We don't want to sit there and let the government decide our fate. So we, in my opinion, have an opportunity here to give some direction to the government. Just to start, I agree, we do need to be stamping our feet. I think the public should be stamping their feet. As I said, this has not been a democratic process. But our job today is to decide a way forward and give government a direction. We have the opportunity to do that by way of submission. So let's concentrate on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Worship. Everyone's had their say, so I'll do the same. And I agree with most of the sentiment. To come back to comment Councillor Woodward made, the system's broken. Absolutely. Totally agree. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the incredible work that staff have done over a significant period of time to get us to where we are right now. And I'm conscious that this comes at an opportunity cost on all the other things that we need to do, all of which are sitting in abeyance, but we'll get to that sooner or later. The other thing I'd say is the need for change is well made out. Local government, as we know, is well overdue for a change, as was a water services delivery. I'll reflect on that in a second. The dilemma we've got is that past decisions, and we've already acknowledged one of our former mayors sadly passed away overnight. But I look at the photos at the back of the room. Decisions made under all of those regimes with all of the senior staff and council staff have put us in the position we're in right now. If we'd made a mess of everything, we'd have no choice but to throw ourselves to the mercy of everyone else, but we haven't. And I agree with Sarah, yes, we could have done things better over the years, but by and large, good decisions have been made for a long time, going all the way back to Mayor Joan Williamson. I reflect on Three Waters, which then turned into Waikato Waters Done Well. The difference there is that we had a team of mayors who met regularly over a period of 18 months to 2 years with a combined team of staff working together, not working in isolation. At the moment, we've got multiple councils with multiple groups of staff creating lots and lots of information and coming up with different conclusions and different options. and we've put form ahead of function. It's backside about face. We're talking about what the structure should be, and then we're going to slot in what we're going to do to whatever that structure is. The other thing I'd say is that by government decree, all councils are effectively in breach of our obligations to consult with our communities under the Local Government Act. Meaningful consultation, and we have not been afforded the opportunity to do that. And I raised that in one of the mayoral forums in the Bay of Plenty, and the answer was less than forthright. This is a once-in-a-generation change, and it needs to be treated with the seriousness it requires. And I note that, no disrespect to a lot of our neighbours, north, south and west of here, lots and lots of changes are occurring right up to the present time. This has the potential of derailing the entire sector with all the other legislative changes that are coming. And as Nick has said in the presentation, you simply can't do it all and not get a bit wobbly around the edges. I'm going to vote in favour of most, if not all, of the recommendations up there, but I'm leaning towards Councillor Murch's comments, and that we need to be more forthright. And I'm conscious of the information we've got, and I'm comfortable with it, that the best option would be for us to stay as we are for now, but explore other options, including up to following the river all the way to the mouth of the river as an option. But to simply be pushed into making a decision of this magnitude with the timeline we've been given is just unrealistic. So I'm supporting the resolutions we've got as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Cameron's comments before and Councillor Murch's. Forgive me, I'm starting to sort of fade away here. But so we do not have a Head Start proposal, and we don't want to be put into backstop. And we can submit the information that we've got, we can show where we're thinking, but like Councillor Murch said, this needs to be more forceful about our opposition to this. We could lead the public down to Parliament if we wanted. And yeah, this is still just, it's too much for us to have to do in this way. It is about the outcomes, and with the system being broken, it is the outcomes that we need to be proving here.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Now, we're hearing differing views around the table. I'm just wondering if, subject to the mover and seconders' approval, we could go through that recommendation clause by clause.
Look, I wonder if there's a simpler way. Yes, we can go through point by point, but could we perhaps direct that we would like to formulate a submission with the content to be confirmed at a later date? I suggest that we need to put a bit more time and effort into what that submission should contain. Is that an option that is palatable around the table?
Look, I fully appreciate you're in debate and this is completely inappropriate, but just a reminder, and particularly for those that are listening, you do have a council meeting on the 6th, and that is for you to approve what is submitted. What we are looking for is guidance for staff to be able to go away and formulate that for you. Apologies, it is completely inappropriate for me to speak right now, but I thought that was helpful.
Through the chair.
Okay, so as I'm the mover of this recommendation, I'm happy if that's the view of the table to go through point by point.
Could the seconder give their point of view? You have the same view. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment over that. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. Keeping in mind that there is a time frame associated with this, which is next week, the week after, is it? Yeah, next week. I would like to suggest that between now and Thursday, that we formulate that we make that decision on Thursday this week.
We've got a bit more time than that, haven't we?
Following Tuesday.
Look, I'll just clarify. So probably again appreciate you're in debate. The deadline for submitting something to government is the 9th of August. That unbelievably is a Sunday, which is awesome. You have a council meeting on the 6th of August, which is next Thursday, to sign off whatever you submit to government. Legally, I have to give 2 working days notice for an agenda. So that means that the latest we could send something out is on the Monday, which is the 3rd of August. I am looking for staff direction today because clearly following this meeting we have a short time to turn around something for you to consider and put out on an agenda on Monday. So just to clarify what the next steps are from here.
Can I please?
Councillor
Thank
Woolman.
you. So the only change I was hoping to make on these recommendations would be to make it very clear we have no Head Start proposal. And that's for the benefit of our community who were expecting to come into this meeting and us to approve one of those 4. And then the rest of these points, I'm happy for that to make up our proposal to review on the 6th. But that would be my only suggestion, is to make it very clear we are not going ahead.
The seconder would like to say something. Duncan, we need a microphone.
Just an observation that it seems to me some have sort of indicated that they won't be voting for this anyway. Some have indicated that they are willing to vote for it as is, maybe 1 or 2 changes. The idea is that it sets the outline of the work that the staff will be doing for our meeting, next week. I just wonder if we put it to the vote. If there's one or two changes that need to be made, put the whole thing to the vote. If it doesn't pass, then we'll need to go through it one by one. But my feeling is some are going to vote against it regardless of what it says. Some are going to vote for it and are happy given it's the outline. Oh, okay. I retract that statement if I can't say that. That's the feeling I'm getting from the room. And so just as a suggestion, that might be workable.
Can we hear from the mover on that, please? Sorry, Duncan.
I agree with that, actually. We're still going to have a submission put before us that we will have input into as far as wording anyhow. So, yeah, let's put it to the vote. If we've got a majority, let's get on with getting a submission, at least a draft, and then we can go through the finer detail of the wording at that point.
Councillor Midge.
Thanks. Yeah, my only comment was just around the ending, because we're talking strategy within this resolution, within this recommendation, right? And my only change was to the strategic approach of the way that we're going to approach this process. And point 9 and 10 specifically talks about the strategic approach, and we've just had a conversation around being more forthright in our opposition to the process. And if those 2 points are in there, then I want that added in there somewhere, because I want to get the feeling, I want to understand from councillors around the table whether or not we are in agreement to pushing back and pushing back hard, because like I said, these do not satisfy my idea of pushing back hard. And if we're having a strategic approach within this resolution, then I want that included as well. That was my only other addition. I was not wanting to go through each individual point, but I do think that we need to get on the same page here and quickly, because who said, what's that quote about a house divided against itself cannot stand. So let's sort it out right now.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, look, I think Councillor Del wasn't so out of order because I probably will be voting against this proposal no matter what it says now. But I just want to highlight, look, this paper was written, I don't know when we got it, Thursday, and since then we've received notification from Waikato and Waipa that they have a proposal which includes us. And now I recognise that we have now not had an opportunity to look at that in any detail at all. We might have a closer look at it and decide that actually that really is in our interest, but we haven't even looked at it. So I'm suggesting we defer this decision from today to another next week until this has been looked at. We've got a proposal for us we're included in, which we might get swept in along anyway. How can we make a decision today and not even look at it?
I can answer that for you by voting. Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you, Worship. The two that I specifically have an issue with is number 5, acknowledges that the financial analysis shows Taupo District Council could be a sustainable and viable unitary authority. I completely disagree with that, and I completely disagree with 8F. Explain why Council is not supportive of being included in alternative proposals proposed by other councils. I think that's a very hard one for us to be able to put in a recommendation, that we're not prepared to listen to other people's views. Those are the two I'm mostly concerned about.
Can I just get the mover and seconder to confirm they're happy for this to be put to the vote?
I'm happy to put it to the vote and deal with semantics later.
I'm happy to put it to the vote. And just in, if I may, while I've got the mic, in response to Councillor Campbell's comment, we could be, A, I don't think they've actually officially done that at the meeting, it was just their intention, but also B, we could be putting someone's proposal tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. We're on a time frame here. We're making the best decision we've got with the information we've got. And I acknowledge that, yes, we've been mentioned, but we could be tomorrow again, the next day and the next day, and I just don't think it's a feasible suggestion. So, yes, happy to take this to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Delator. So we've got a motion, moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Delator. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Now just
Sorry,
have to hold your hands up.
Sorry, point of order. I thought we were going to do this individually.
I suggested
all right.
Well, that if it doesn't pass, that's where we'll be going to. So can we're putting the motion to the vote? Can you
Through
hold
the
your
Chair,
hand
I
up?
just want to reiterate my point that we will still have a submission put before us to discuss. If the wording or the points are not appropriate, I think that's the time to dive into the detail of what the wording is. I take the point that we need to be strong in our wording, but you can raise that when the submission is in front of us. I get that you don't agree with all of those points, but you can raise that when we're looking at the submission. I think there is an opportunity to be able to meet all of the needs that are coming out of this table, but it doesn't have to be done right this minute. So
we are meeting on the 6th of August to finalise it. So.
But I presume we're going to be presented with a draft submission, and we will give input and direction to that if required. Correct?
Councillor Murch.
Can I just respond? I feel like I'm repeating myself here. I feel like a submission is not enough. By us approving this resolution, we are also inadvertently approving the strategic approach. And what that strategic approach is missing is our physical campaign, our physical willingness to campaign and lobby against this. If we do not include that in here, then we've already got a strategic approach, and it's just to resort to writing a letter and submission, which I have said is not going to be enough.
It's just a start.
Understood, but we've got a mover and a seconder for that motion. Probably the simplest way forward is to put it. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. You're going to have to hold your hand up. And against? That's democracy for you folks. Do you need to record that? So that's lost.
So in that case, we go point by point. Is that right?
If that's the desire, I think that is the way forward. Just need to check on time though.
Do you want to open the meeting and then close it? We'll do that now, we're at that point. So if you can just adjourn this meeting.
Yeah. We're going to have to adjourn this meeting to get to open the next council meeting, so we can close that, adjourn that one, and come back to this one. There's a chance we might stop for a cup of coffee in between.
It's entirely your call. Sorry. Yeah.
So can someone move that we...
No, you don't need to move.
We don't need to move it? So for all the public and everyone in the room, we're adjourning this meeting now. And...
Sorry, through the chair, did Councillor Leonard vote? She's online.
I voted for.
Okay, so and it's your casting vote then, Your Worship?
What did you vote for though? Did you
I was voting for this motion going through.
Right, so then it's...
Did you cast a vote, Your Worship? If you did, then it's part. Did you vote?
If it helps your decision making, a casting vote normally in the course of business would be to retain the status quo. So that is what's on the board.
So Karen, do you just want to just clarify the voting numbers? Just to clarify.
Thank you. Through the chair, there are 13 of you in total, so the need for a casting vote is not actually required. We had 7 votes for and 6 against, so therefore it would be carried. My understanding.
So now we have to go through...
No. 4, yes, correct.
But don't sweat it, folks, because we're meeting again on the 6th.
So can we just explain? We have just confirmed, can we explain this for everybody and the public? We have just voted that we'll be doing all these recommendations on the board, but then next week on Thursday we're then going to go through it.
So no, you have passed the recommendations that are on the board. They are now the resolutions of council from today, which have been passed. On the 6th, you are meeting to sign off what you are sending to government.
My question, though, before we voted was, would we receive a draft and be able to give input into that?
Yep.
So that we can adjust the tone, we can adjust the wording, we can add in, take out.
Yeah.
And
So just to be clear though, you will get a draft, but that is now our staff direction to the team in terms of what will be drafted to come to you for next week's meeting.
Has the notes around the table been noted in the minutes, however, to feed into that as well?
Righto, so we're closing this meeting now.
Through the chair, I just need to clarify then that we've just approved the strategic approach which does not include a campaign or a physical lobby against this process. Please clarify. Yep. Great. There you go, Taupō.
So again, I'm just taking this as now the decision of council. This will be the direction to staff to come back to you. Councillor Murch, I guess you can have that other conversation on the 6th in terms of if there's any additional actions that you want to be able to reinforce your messages to government. So there is an opportunity there. But I will be using this as what I bring you next week.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we will have input into the submission. We will approve it or otherwise on the 6th. And we can also decide some future direction in terms of pushing back and what that campaign might look like at that meeting. Thank you.
And what's the time? Sorry.
Okay, so once again, we're adjourning this meeting.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Just
Yep.
Through the
like
chair.
to know the timing so we can come back to the staff quickly with our input. You know, I don't want to sit there on the 6th and put some stuff in. Will we get information, say, on Tuesday that we can have a timeline to respond if we don't think it's meaty enough?
Because we need to open the next meeting and adjourn that one. So this is the meeting for today at 1 p.m. And we wish to adjourn that. Is that all we have?
through the chair, I just would like to point out that I voted in favour of this based on the fact that we were going to have input into the wording and in the submission. That is the whole reason I voted for this. Otherwise, I've voted under misinformation or a misunderstanding. That's why I asked the question, will we have input?
So I'm going to clarify then. Yes, you will have input, but in terms of us going away now to draft, we'll be using this as the basis to draft. So, yep, you will have input, and certainly our intention is, I've indicated to you, we have to give you 2 clear working days notice. We are working to the best of our ability in the time frame we've got, so the intention may be that the notice for the meeting goes out and the submission is tabled slightly separately, but we are working absolutely as fast as we can to get you something by Monday next week.
Can I ask a question of clarification, because I'm a little bit like Rachel. I voted for it thinking we would have some input. So if we had some immediate input, can we put that forward instead of waiting for that information to come to us?
Yeah, we're all nodding. Yes, I guess the challenge will be whatever we draft now has to align with the decisions that you've made. But if you have thoughts in terms of beefing up the response, if you have thoughts around particular points that you want to make, it would be good to hear from you so that we know. I just can't re-debate the meeting, that's all. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I was very specific when I asked about the input into the wording, because that was my attempt to keep this meeting moving with the intention that we do want to push back, we do want to have a strong submission, and we do want to have input into it. That's the only reason I've moved it and voted in favour of it. So if that is not the outcome that we will get, then I'm not happy.
And I can confirm you will have those opportunities then. Yep.
Okay, we've closed this meeting, and we can open the meeting starting at 1 o'clock so that we can adjourn that and go and have a lunch break. And so we'll be recommencing at 1:45.
No, that's fine. Thanks, John. Did that make sense? Yeah.